There's a quiet kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into a room demanding attention. It doesn't chase validation. It doesn't need applause to exist. And because of that, most people never realize they have it. You've probably felt it before, those moments when you overthink, when you question yourself, when you notice things others ignore, when your mind refuses to settle for simple answers. You thought it was a weakness. You thought it meant you were behind. But what if that discomfort is actually proof of something deeper? What if the very things you've been trying to fix about yourself are actually signs that you're far more aware, far more capable, and far more intelligent than you've been led to believe? Because intelligence is not always loud, so it looks like doubt. Sometimes it feels like confusion, sometimes it shows up as silence. And if you don't understand it, you will mislabel it. The problem, we live in a world that has a very narrow definition of what it means to be smart. You were taught that intelligence is about quick answers, high grades, fast thinking, speaking confidently, always knowing what to say. The loudest person in the room is often seen as the smartest. The fastest thinker is praised. The one who never hesitates is admired. But here's the problem. Real intelligence doesn't always look like that. In fact, some of the most intelligent people hesitate more. They question more. They struggle internally in ways that others don't even notice. But instead of recognizing this, society punishes it. You start to believe that your overthinking is a flaw, that your self-doubt is weakness, that your quiet nature means you lack confidence or worse, capability. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to shrink. You hold back your thoughts because you think they're not good enough. You second-guess your instincts because you assume others know better. You silence your curiosity because it makes you feel different. And the worst part, you start comparing your internal world to someone else's external performance. You see someone speaking fluently, confidently, effortlessly, and you assume they must be smarter than you. But you don't see what's happening beneath the surface. You don't see the depth of your own thinking. You don't see the patterns you naturally recognize. You don't see the way your mind processes reality differently. Because intelligence that is internal is invisible, and invisible things are easy to doubt. This is why so many people walk through life underestimating themselves, not because they lack intelligence, but because they don't recognize the form it takes. Beginning of explanation. Let's start breaking this illusion. The first psychological fact, the one that confuses people the most, is this. Highly intelligent people often doubt themselves more, not less. At first glance, this sounds like a contradiction. Shouldn't intelligence create confidence? Shouldn't being smart mean you're certain about things? That's what we've been taught. But reality works differently, because the more aware you become, the more you realize how much you don't know. Think about it. A person with limited understanding sees the world in simple terms. Things are either right or wrong, bad or black or white. There's no complexity, so there's no confusion. But when your mind starts to expand, when you begin to see multiple perspectives, hidden layers, deeper patterns, certainty begins to disappear. You start asking better questions, and better questions don't always have immediate answers. So instead of feeling confident, you feel uncertain. Instead of feeling sure, you feel conflicted. And instead of trusting yourself, you start questioning everything. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They interpret this uncertainty as weakness. They think, if I were really smart, I would know what to do. If I were intelligent, I wouldn't feel this confused. But the truth is, that confusion is not a lack of intelligence, it's a sign of it. There's a psychological phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. It explains that people with low ability in a certain area tend to overestimate their competence, while people with high ability tend to underestimate it. Why? Because those who know less don't see the gaps in their knowledge, but those who know more become painfully aware of how much there is still to learn. So they hesitate, they double-check, they question themselves, not because they're incapable, but because they're aware, and awareness changes everything. It makes you slower to judge, more careful with decisions, more open to being wrong. And in a world that rewards quick answers and loud confidence, this kind of thinking can feel like a disadvantage. But it's not. It's depth, and depth takes time. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. That voice in your head, the one that keeps analyzing, questioning, replaying conversations, imagining different outcomes. You've probably tried to silence it. You've probably told yourself, I think too much. But what if that voice is actually one of your greatest strengths? Because people who engage in deep internal dialogue are often practicing something powerful without even realizing it. Metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. This is not something everyone does. Many people simply react to life. They experience emotions, make decisions, and move on without ever analyzing why. You pause, you reflect. You replay situations in your mind, not because you're broken, but because your brain is trying to understand patterns. You're asking, why did I feel that way? What could I have done? What does this say about me, about others, about life? This process can feel exhausting, It can make you feel stuck in your own head, but it also does something incredibly valuable. It sharpens your awareness. It helps you learn faster, not just from your own experiences, but from your mistakes. It builds a deeper understanding of human behavior, and over time, it gives you an edge that most people don't even realize exists, because while others repeat the same patterns unconsciously, you start to see them. And once you see a pattern, you have the power to break it. But here's the catch. If you don't understand this about yourself, your strength turns into suffering, your reflection turns into overthinking, your awareness turns into anxiety, your intelligence turns into self-doubt, not because it is harmful, but because it is unmanaged. And that's where discipline comes in, because intelligence without discipline becomes chaos. A sharp mind without direction will cut itself. That's why so many intelligent people feel stuck, not because they lack ability, but because they haven't learned how to use it. They haven't learned how to channel their thoughts into action. They haven't learned how to balance reflection with movement, so they stay in their heads thinking, analyzing, planning, doing. And over time, this creates frustration, because deep down, they know they're capable of more, they can feel it, but they don't know how to access it consistently. And this brings us to something most people never talk about. Being aware of your potential can be more painful than not knowing it exists at all. Because when you know what you could be, every moment of inaction feels heavier, every delay feels like wasted time, every missed opportunity feels personal, and this internal pressure can either push you forward or paralyze you completely. That's why understanding your mind is not optional, it's necessary, because if you don't understand how your intelligence works, you will keep misinterpreting it. You will keep fighting yourself. You will keep trying to become someone else, someone louder, faster, more certain, when in reality, your strength was never meant to look like that. So before we even move to the next psychological fact, pause for a moment, look at your own patterns, your self-doubt, your constant questioning. What if these are not flaws? What if they are signals? Signals that your mind is operating at a deeper level, but you haven't been given the tools to manage it yet. Because once you learn how to direct it, everything changes. Your doubt becomes precision, your reflection becomes clarity, your awareness becomes power. And this is just the beginning, because the next psychological truth will challenge something even more uncomfortable. The way you experience boredom, distraction, and focus. What if your inability to stay interested in certain things is not laziness? What if it's actually a sign that your brain is wired differently? In the next part, we'll go deeper into this and uncover another hidden trait that most people misunderstand completely. In the last part, we uncover something uncomfortable yet freeing, that your self-doubt, your overthinking, your constant questioning, these are not signs of weakness, they are signs of depth. Now we move into something even more misunderstood, because if you've ever struggled with focus, if you've ever felt bored quickly, if you've ever started something with intensity and then lost interest just as fast, you've probably labeled yourself as undisciplined, maybe even lazy. But what if that label is wrong? What if the issue is not your discipline, but the way your mind responds to stimulation? Psychological fact 2, intelligent minds are harder to satisfy, and that's why they get bored easily. This is where things start to get frustrating, because from the outside, it looks like inconsistency. You start something new, full of energy, curiosity, excitement. For a while, you're locked in, focused, almost obsessed. And then suddenly it fades. The same task that once felt engaging now feels repetitive, predictable, empty. So you pull away, you look for something new, and the cycle repeats. Now, if you don't understand what's happening, this becomes dangerous, because you start creating a story about yourself. I can't stick to anything. I lack discipline. I'm just not consistent like others. But the truth is deeper than that. Your brain is not rejecting effort. It's rejecting low stimulation. Highly intelligent minds tend to process information faster. They recognize patterns quicker. They understand systems earlier than others, which means what is challenging for most people becomes predictable for you much sooner. And once something becomes predictable, it becomes boring. Not because you're incapable of doing it, but because your brain no longer finds it engaging. This is why repetition feels heavy. This is why routine can feel suffocating. This is why you crave something more even when you can't explain what that more is. And here's where most people go wrong. They try to force themselves into environments that don't match their mental speed. They follow systems designed for average engagement levels. And when they struggle to stay consistent, they blame themselves instead of questioning the system. But let's be honest, this trait has a dark side. Because if you keep chasing only what feels interesting, you will never build anything meaningful, because everything, no matter how exciting at the beginning, eventually becomes repetitive. Every skill, every goal, every path. At some point, it stops being new and starts requiring discipline. This is the moment where most intelligent people fall behind, not because they lack ability, but because they haven't trained themselves to push through the phase where excitement disappears. They become addicted to the start, but they never master the continuation. This creates a dangerous loop. You begin many things but finish very few. You gain surface level knowledge in multiple areas but struggle to go deep in one. You feel capable of more but don't have the results to prove it. And over time, this creates frustration because you can feel your potential. You can see the bigger picture. You know you're not average, but your actions don't align with that identity. And that gap between who you are and what you produce becomes painful. So the question becomes, how do you break this cycle? How do you stay consistent when your mind is constantly seeking stimulation? The answer is not to fight your nature, it's to understand it and work with it. First, you need to realize this. Boredom is not the enemy, it's a threshold. It's the point where surface level engagement ends and real growth begins. Most people quit at boredom. But if you stay just a little longer, you enter a different state, a deeper state, where the mind stops seeking novelty and starts building mastery. This is where repetition becomes refinement. This is where small details become visible. This is where true skill is developed. But to reach this level, you must train yourself to sit in discomfort, to continue even when it feels dull, to show up even when there's no excitement. And this is where discipline separates potential from reality. Now here's the paradox. Your intelligence gives you an advantage at the beginning, but without discipline, it becomes a disadvantage in the long run. Because while others struggle early and build resilience, you move fast early and struggle later when things slow down. So you have to consciously build what others develop naturally, the ability to stay with one path, to stay with one skill, to stay with one goal long enough to see it compound, because depth requires time, and time requires consistency. But there's another layer to this, something even more subtle. Highly intelligent individuals often don't just get bored with tasks. They get bored with people, with conversations, with environments that lack depth. You may have experienced this without fully understanding it. Surface-level conversations feel draining. Repetitive topics feel exhausting. You crave something more meaningful, more stimulating, more real, but you rarely find it, so you withdraw. Not because you dislike people, but because you struggle to connect at the level you desire, and this creates a different kind of loneliness, not the kind that comes from being alone, the kind that comes from feeling unseen. This is where many people begin to isolate themselves. They stop trying to explain their thoughts, they stop engaging deeply, they keep things simple, not because they are simple, but because they've learned that most people won't understand the complexity anyway, and over time they become quieter, more reserved, more internal. Now again, if you don't understand this pattern, you will mislabel it. You will think, maybe I'm just antisocial, maybe I'm the problem, maybe I should just be like everyone else. But the truth is, you're not struggling to connect, you're struggling to find alignment, and that's different, because forcing yourself into shallow environments will only drain you further. But at the same time, you cannot use this as an excuse to disconnect completely, because isolation, if left unchecked, becomes a trap. So what's the balance? You learn to operate on two levels. You learn to engage with the world as it is, while still protecting the depth within you. You don't expect every conversation to be profound. You don't demand every environment to stimulate you. But you also don't abandon your need for meaning. You create space for it through your work, through your habits, through the few people who truly understand you. Because intelligence is not just about thinking deeply. It's about directing that depth in something real, something tangible, something that exists outside your mind. And this brings us to a crucial realization: your struggle with boredom, your need for stimulation, your difficulty staying consistent. These are not random flaws, they are patterns that reveal how your mind is wired. And once you see the pattern, you can change the way you respond to it. Instead of chasing constant excitement, you start building structured challenges. Instead of quitting when things feel repetitive, you lean into refinement. Instead of blaming yourself for losing interest, you ask, how can I make this deeper? How can I push this further? How can I turn this into mastery? Because at the end of the day, the goal is not to feel motivated. The goal is to become consistent, not temporarily, but permanently. And consistency is not built on excitement. It's built on identity, on becoming the kind of person who shows up regardless of how they feel. But even this is not the full picture, because there's another psychological trait, one that hides in plain sight, one that most people misunderstand completely. And it has nothing to do with how fast you think or how long you can focus, but rather how you see yourself in relation to others. Why some of the most intelligent people often feel like they're behind in life, even when they're not. Why they feel like outsiders, even in rooms where they belong. And why this quiet sense of not enough can either break you or become the very thing that pushes you towards something greater. There's a feeling that doesn't make sense on the surface. You've achieved things, you've learned, you've grown in ways most people around you haven't. And yet, there's this quiet voice in the background that says, You're still not there. You're behind. You could be so much more. It doesn't shout, it whispers, but it never really goes away. You see others moving forward, building careers, gaining recognition, becoming visible, and something inside you tightens. Not necessarily jealousy, but a strange discomfort, a question that lingers in your mind. What am I doing wrong? And no matter how much you think about it, the answer never feels complete, because deep down, you don't feel average. You feel like there's something more in you, something unrealized, something waiting. But the distance between where you are and where you think you should be feels too big. Psychological fact-free, intelligent people often feel behind, not because they are, but because they see further ahead. This is one of the most misunderstood internal struggles. From the outside, it looks like insecurity, but internally it's something else. It's vision. Most people measure progress based on what's visible right now. They compare themselves to their immediate surroundings, their friends, their environment. And if they're doing better, then that circle they feel ahead. But your mind doesn't work like that. You don't just see where you are, you see where things could go. You imagine future possibilities. You visualize different paths, different outcomes, different versions of yourself. And because of that, your comparison point is not the present, it's the future. And this creates a constant sense of falling short. Because no matter how much progress you make, you're always aware of what's still possible, what's still missing, what hasn't been built yet. This is why success doesn't always feel satisfying. You reach a goal and instead of feeling complete, your mind immediately moves the target. This is good, but it's not enough. And if you don't understand this pattern, it becomes exhausting because you feel like you're running, but never arriving. Now here's where it gets dangerous. If this feeling is left unchecked, it slowly turns into something heavier, self-doubt, not the kind we talked about earlier, the reflective kind, but a deeper, more personal doubt that questions your identity. Maybe I'm not as capable as I thought. Maybe I'm wasting time. Maybe I'm not built for this. And the more you think like this, the more you disconnect from your own progress. You stop recognizing how far you've come because your focus is always on how far you still have to go. This is where many intelligent people get trapped. Not in failure, but in perception, because reality says one thing, but your mind tells you another. Reality says you're growing. Your mind says you're behind. Reality shows improvement. Your mind highlights the gap. And over time, the gap feels more real than the progress itself. But here's the truth you need to understand. Seeing further ahead is a gift, but only if you learn how to ground yourself in the present, because vision without grounding becomes pressure, and pressure without control becomes paralysis. You don't need to shrink your vision. You don't need to lower your standards, but you do need to change how you relate to them. Instead of using your future as a weapon against yourself, you learn to use it as direction. There's a difference. When your future becomes a weapon, it constantly reminds you of what you're not. When it becomes direction, it quietly guides you toward what you can become. And that shift is internal. It's not about doing more, it's about thinking differently. Now let's go deeper, because this feeling of being behind is often connected to something else, something even more subtle. Many intelligent individuals don't just have high vision, they also have high self-awareness. They see their flaws clearly, they notice their inconsistencies, they recognize where they fall short. And while this sounds like a strength, it comes with a cost, because when you see your flaws too clearly, you start to identify with them. You don't just notice your weaknesses, you begin to believe they define you. For example, you procrastinate sometimes and your mind says, I'm inconsistent. You hesitate on a decision and your mind says, I lack confidence. You make a mistake and your mind says, I'm not good enough. This is the trap, because awareness without control turns into self-criticism. And self-criticism, when repeated long enough, becomes identity. Now you're not just someone who struggles sometimes, you're someone who believes they are the struggle. And that belief changes how you act. It makes you hesitate more. It makes you hold back. It makes you question yourself even in moments where you should move forward. This is why some of the most capable people appear less confident than they actually are, not because they lack ability, because they are too aware of their imperfections. Meanwhile, someone with less awareness, less depth, moves forward without hesitation, not because they're better, but because they don't see as much. And again, if you don't understand this dynamic, you will compare yourself unfairly. You will think confidence equals competence. You will think speed equals intelligence. You will think certainty equals correctness. But that's not how it works. Real intelligence is often quiet, measured, careful, and sometimes slow because it is processing more, considering more. But here's the challenge. The world does not always reward depth immediately. It rewards visibility, action, output. And if you stay too long in your internal world, you will feel left behind even if you're not. So again, we return to the same principle, balance. You don't abandon your awareness, but you also don't let it control you. You don't silence your inner voicey, but you don't let it become your identity either. You learn to separate observation from judgment. You can notice your flaws without labeling yourself as flawed. You can recognize your mistakes without turning them into proof of failure. Because once you create that separation, something shifts. Your awareness stops being heavy and starts becoming useful. It becomes a tool, something you can use to adjust, improve, refine, instead of something that holds you back. And slowly, that feeling of being behind begins to change. It doesn't disappear completely, but it becomes lighter, less personal, more like a signal than a sentence, a signal that says, there's more you can do. You're not enough. That difference changes everything. But we're still not done, because there's another layer to this, another psychological truth that hides beneath everything we've talked about so far. And it's one of the most powerful and most misunderstood of them all. It's about sensitivity, not emotional weakness, but something deeper. Why some people feel things more intensely, why they pick up on subtle changes in behavior, why they can read a room without anyone saying a word, and why this ability, if not understood, can become overwhelming. In the next part, we're going to explore this trait in detail and uncover why what you thought was too much might actually be one of your greatest strengths. There's a moment you've probably experienced it more times than you can count. You walk into a room and nothing is said directly to you. No one explains anything. No one points anything out, and yet you feel it, a shift in energy, a subtle tension, a change in someone's tone, posture, or expression. Something is off, and while others continue as if everything is normal, your mind starts picking up signals, small details, micro expressions, unspoken emotions, and suddenly, without anyone telling you anything, you understand more than what's visible. But instead of seeing this as a strength, you've probably questioned it. Why do I feel things so deeply? Why do I notice everything? Why can't I just be like others and ignore it? Because sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like too much. And over time, you start wishing you could turn it off. Psychological factor 114. High emotional sensitivity is often a sign of deep cognitive intelligence, not weakness. This is where people get it completely wrong. They associate sensitivity with fragility. They think if you feel more, you must be weaker, less stable, less in control. But in reality, sensitivity, when understood properly, is a form of awareness. Your brain's constantly scanning your environment, not just for obvious information, but for subtle cues, tone of voice, body language, movement, silence between words, things most people overlook. Your mind processes automatically, and this ability has a name. It's often linked to high emotional intelligence, and in many cases, heightened perceptual awareness. You're not just hearing words, you're reading meaning. You're not just seeing behavior, you're interpreting intention. This is why you can often tell when someone is lying, even if you can't immediately explain how. It's why you sense when someone is uncomfortable, even when they say they're fine. It's why certain environments drain you, while others feel calm and aligned. Your mind is not reacting randomly, it's processing more data. But here's the problem. When you don't understand this ability, it starts to feel like a burden because you're constantly absorbing information that others ignore. Emotions that aren't yours start to feel like they are. Tension in a room becomes your tension. Negativity around you becomes something you carry, and this leads to exhaustion, not physical, but mental and emotional fatigue. You begin to feel overwhelmed in crowded places, drained after social interactions, tired without knowing exactly why. And again, if you don't understand what's happening, you think, I'm too sensitive, I need to toughen up diet, something is wrong with me. But the truth is, nothing is wrong with you. You're just open in a world that doesn't teach people how to manage openness, because sensitivity without boundaries becomes overload. This is the part no one explains. Having a heightened awareness of emotions and energy is powerful, but only if you learn how to filter it. Think of it like this. Your mind is like a receiver. It picks up signals from everything around you. But if you don't control what you tune into, you'll hear everything at once. And that noise will overwhelm you. So the goal is not to shut it off, because that's not possible. And even if it were, you would lose something valuable. The goal is to develop control, to decide what you engage with and what you let pass. Now, this requires discipline, a different kind of discipline than we talked about before. Not just discipline of action, but discipline of attention. Because where your attention goes, your energy follows. If you constantly focus on negative signals, your mind amplifies them. If you absorb every emotion around you, you lose your center. But if you learn to observe without absorbing, everything changes. You can walk into a tense room, recognize the tension, but not carry it. You can sense someone's frustration, but not make it your responsibility. You can understand emotions without being controlled by them. This is the difference between awareness and absorption, and mastering that difference is what turns sensitivity into strength. Now let's go deeper, Because this trait doesn't just affect how you experience environments, it also affects how you experience relationships. You don't connect with people easily, not because you can't, but because you don't find depth everywhere. You're not satisfied with surface level interactions. You look for meaning, authenticity, real understanding. And when you don't find it, you pull back. This is why your circle tends to be small, not by accident, but by design, because your mind filters people the same way it filters information. You're constantly asking, even subconsciously, is this real? Is this aligned? Is this worth my energy? And while this protects you, it also creates distance, because deep connection is rare and waiting for it can feel lonely. But here's what you need to understand. Your sensitivity is not isolating you. It's guiding you. It's helping you avoid environments that don't align with you. It's helping you recognize people who aren't genuine. It's protecting your energy in ways you don't fully realize. But again, if you don't understand it, you will fight it. You will try to fit into spaces that drain you. You will ignore your instincts. You will override your awareness just to feel included. And that's where the real damage happens. Because every time you ignore that inner signal, you move further away from yourself. So instead of suppressing your sensitivity, you refine it, you learn when to engage, and when to step back. You learn how to stay present without becoming overwhelmed. You learn how to care without carrying everything. And most importantly, you stop seeing it as a weakness, because when directed properly, this trait gives you an advantage most people don't have. You understand people faster. You navigate social situations more effectively. You build deeper, more meaningful connections. You see things others miss. But there's one more layer to this, one that ties everything together: your awareness, your overthinking, your need for depth, your sensitivity. All of these point to something bigger, something most people never fully realize. You're not just reacting to the world, you are trying to understand it, and that desire to understand, to go beyond the surface, to question, analyze, and feel deeply is what sets you apart. But it also creates a new challenge, because once you start seeing the world differently, you can't go back. You can't unsee patterns. You can't ignore inconsistencies. You can't pretend things make sense when they don't. And this creates a kind of internal friction between what you see and how the world operates. And if you don't learn how to manage that friction, it turns into frustration, disconnection, even cynicism. But if you learn how to channel it, it becomes clarity, direction, purpose. And that's where we're heading next, because the next psychological fact is not about how you think or how you feel, but about something even more foundational: how you question reality itself, why some people naturally challenge norms, why they struggle to follow systems blindly, and why this trait can either make you feel lost or lead you to build something entirely your own. By now, something inside you should feel different, not louder, not overly confident, but clearer, because what we've done here is not give you motivation, we've given you recognition. You've seen how your self-doubt is not weakness but awareness, how your boredom is not laziness but a mind that craves depth, how your feeling of be behind is not failure but vision reaching further than your current reality, how your sensitivity is not fragility but perception operating at a higher level, and how your tendency to question everything is not rebellion without reason but a refusal to accept the world blindly. These are not random traits, they are patterns, and together they form a different kind of intelligence. But now comes the part most people avoid, because understanding yourself is only the beginning. The real question is, what will you do with it? Because awareness without action becomes frustration. You already know that feeling: think deeply but not moving, understanding more but not applying it, seeing potential but not stepping into it. That's the trap. And if you stay there, all of this becomes useless. So the goal is not just to realize that you're smarter than you thought. The goal is to become someone who uses that intelligence with discipline, because discipline is what grounds intelligence. It turns scattered thoughts into focused action. It turns potential to results. It turns awareness into transformation. Without discipline, your mind will keep exploring, but your life will stay in the same place. So you have to make a decision, a quiet one, not announced to the world, not posted anywhere, just a shift within yourself, a decision that says, I will stop fighting my nature and start directing it. You don't need to become louder. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to chase validation from people who don't even understand the way you think. What you need is alignment. Alignment between your thoughts and your actions, between your awareness and your behavior, between your potential and your daily choices. Because once those things align, everything changes. Your overthinking becomes strategy, your sensitivity becomes insight, your questioning becomes clarity, your vision becomes direction, and slowly, the gap you once felt between who you are and who you could be starts to close. Not all at once, not overnight, but consistently. You begin to trust yourself more, not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you've learned how to move even when you don't. You begin to respect your mind, not fear it. And most importantly, you stop underestimating yourself, because that was the real problem all along. Not lack of intelligence, not lack of ability, but lack of recognition. You were measuring yourself using the wrong standards, comparing your internal depth to someone else's external expression, judging your complexity as confusion. But now you see it differently. Now you understand that intelligence is not always visible. It's not always fast. It's not always loud. Sometimes it looks like silence, like hesitation, like questioning, like feeling deeply. And if you learn how to work with it instead of against it, it becomes your greatest advantage. So from this point forward, carry this awareness with you, not as ego, not as superiority, but as responsibility. Because if you truly are capable of seeing more, understanding more, feeling more, then you also carry the responsibility to build more, to create something meaningful from it, to turn your depth into something real, not for validation, but for purpose. Because at the end of the day, it's not enough to be intelligent. It's not enough to think deeply. It's not enough to understand the world. You have to act, you have to apply, you have to become. And that journey starts quietly, with small, consistent decisions, with discipline, with awareness, with intention. So the next time I ask you, doubt yourself. Pause. And am I smart enough? But am I using what I already have? Because the answer to that question will shape everything that comes next.